In this clip, we are going to take a look at the mechanics for counter-battery fire. Any time that an enemy player executes indirect fire with an artillery unit, as soon as that combat action has been completed, a player can declare an interrupt action and initiate a counter-battery fire cycle. The cycle begins with the initiating player making one fire call to one friendly artillery unit to execute one fire strike against one of the enemy artillery units that just fired. Note that a counter-battery fire cycle can never be started when an artillery unit executes direct fire against an adjacent hex. It can only be started when an artillery unit executes indirect fire. Any friendly headquarters on the map can make the fire call to any artillery unit in its artillery pool as long as the artillery unit is in range of the target. NATO is further limited by the requirement that the calling headquarters and the artillery unit that responds must belong to the same nationality. But it need not be the same nationality as the friendly unit that was just hit by the enemy artillery unit that triggered the counter-battery fire cycle. So if an enemy artillery unit were to attack a U.S. unit, it would be perfectly permissible for a West German headquarters to make a fire call to a West German artillery unit to fire back at that enemy artillery unit. Each counter-battery fire strike can target only one enemy artillery unit that just fired. No other enemy units in the target hex are affected at all by this counter-battery fire strike, even other artillery units that just fired. Otherwise, the strike is conducted like any other fire strike, with the possibility of loss and disruption to the targeted artillery unit. Once the fire strike has been completed, the opposing player has a chance to make a counter-battery fire strike with one of his artillery units against the friendly artillery unit that just fired. When this fire strike is being completed, the friendly player can then shoot back at the enemy artillery unit that just fired, or at another of the enemy artillery units that fired in the original combat that triggered the cycle in the first place. In this fashion, each player keeps alternating one counter-battery fire strike, or passing, until both players pass back-to-back, or there are no more artillery units left that are eligible to fire. So let's take a look at an example. In this case, the 36th Panzer Brigade has activated. During the reconnaissance segment, it successfully acquired this BMP regiment in its bridgehead across the Main, and during the ensuing strike segment, it delivered an ADM strike on that hex, using this rocket artillery unit here. At the end of that ADM strike, the Warsaw Pact player declares that he is interrupting the 36th Panzer strike segment to initiate a counter-battery fire cycle. He selects the forward headquarters from the 27th Guards to make a fire call to the rocket artillery unit subordinate to it here, with the intention of making a counter-battery fire strike against this West German rocket artillery unit that just fired. He makes sure that his rocket artillery unit is in range of the target, which it is. It is also easily within command range of the calling headquarters. He commits the rocket artillery unit by placing a fired marker on it, and then determines which friendly maneuver unit subordinate to the calling HQ and within its command range is best positioned to serve as the spotting unit. In this case, he determines that this BTR unit is his best spotter and that it has a range to the target of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 hexes. The Warsaw Pact player refers to the counter-battery acquisition tables found on his charts and tables booklet. He sees that there are two tables here. Since he is not a U.S. headquarters, he's going to use the all other counter-battery acquisition table, and he determines that at a range of 4 to 6 hexes against an artillery target that is rocket artillery, he has an acquisition value of 9, which means for this fire to succeed, he needs to roll a 9 or higher. He rolls a 5 and misses, This means that no fire strike is executed. Play now moves to the NATO player, who can either pass or conduct a counter-battery fire strike of his own against the Soviet rocket artillery unit that just fired here. The NATO player does choose to make his own counter-battery fire strike. The 36th Panzer Brigade headquarters here makes a fire call to the West German FH-70 howitzer unit here, determines that this is the closest spotting unit at a range of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Moving to the all others counter-battery acquisition table, we again see that at a range of 4 to 6 against an enemy rocket artillery unit, the acquisition value is again a 9. The NATO player rolls a 7 and misses. So again, no counter-battery fire is actually executed. Play now returns to the Warsaw Pact player, who determines that his forward HQ will make another fire call to his DAG here, and this time he's going to execute a counter-battery fire against the NATO FH-70 unit that just fired. He places a fired marker on his DAG. He again uses this BTR unit that has a range of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He refers to the all others counter-battery acquisition table and determines that at a range of 4 through 6 against a towed artillery unit, his acquisition value is a 7. He rolls the die and he gets a 7, which means this time the fire strike is actually executed. His DAG has a printed fire strength of 6, multiplied by 3 steps for 18. No other modifiers apply, so after the standard division by 2, he's coming in with an effective fire strength of 9. The Warsaw Pact player rolls an 8, which produces a +1 hit modifier, meaning that a total of 10 hits are inflicted. Since the adjusted defense strength of the FH-70 unit is only 2 per step, the NATO player absorbs 6 hits by eliminating all 3 steps. The remaining 4 hits are ignored, but in any case would not affect any other NATO units in the target hex, because counter-battery fire is the one form of strike that affects only the target artillery unit. Now play passes back to the NATO player, who decides that he has had enough and passes. The Warsaw Pact player has no more NATO artillery units to target, and has no unfired artillery units remaining, so he too passes. And the NATO player resumes the strike segment of his activation cycle. Note that a counter-battery fire cycle can be initiated whenever an enemy artillery unit fires, during, say, the strike segment, but also whenever an enemy artillery unit fires during any friendly or enemy operation. So counter-battery fire strikes are the one form of strikes that can occur at virtually any point during the game. This concludes this clip.